Greetings, Poe fans, and welcome back to Review Morgue. Jeanie, what movie are we talking about tonight?
Well, this time we are going to be discussing. That was a tongue slip right there.
Freudian slip.
Discussing, yes, the 1950, The Fall of the House of Usher.
Yes,
Dun,
yes.
dun, dun.
And it was directed by Ivan Barnett. And
Yes.
interestingly enough, pulling up the IMDb about him, he only directed a few films.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this earlier that not only the director, but the stars themselves kind of just disappeared. It was like a one-time thing in this movie, and you just kind of
They
didn't see him very
fell with
much
the
after that.
House of Barnett. And
Yes.
so this was one of the movies he was known for, as well as Robbery with Violence in 1958 and Courting Trouble in 1958. And then what's really weird, it said with just his little blurb, he was married to Susan. It doesn't have Susan's last name. It's just he was married to Susan. I thought that was really
Okay.
cool.
I guess Susan didn't want to be known as anything but Susan, I
I
guess.
guess so. And GIB production company was who
Mhm.
produced the movie. Didn't really
Right.
look up much about that. Uh,
No.
we had three main characters. We had some supporting characters as well that we're going to talk about, not in any great detail.
Well, and I'm gonna add this in there that I don't see them so much as supporting actors.
Okay.
To me, they were more of a dramatic audience for the movie
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
because what brought it to me was kind of like, in the old Greek tragedies, and yes, they're old because they're ancient,
Well, yeah.
but the Greek tragedies, you had the chorus, which the chorus was what was telling the majority of the story.
Right. That's true.
While every
It's so true.
Yeah, while everything else that was being acted out, everybody was behind these masks.
Yes.
So the chorus was the one telling the story
Mhm.
while everybody else was acting out. And so now that I think about it, that's what hit me the most about this movie
Okay.
is the intro, the audience, the dramatic audience members that started all was more like the Greek tragedy chorus, in my opinion.
I would totally agree with that. And
Hmm.
so let's go back to that when we're starting to really discuss the story. I was just going
Hmm.
to highlight the three main actors of
Okay,
the
go
whole
ahead.
thing, which uh so Madeline was played by Gwendolyn Watford.
Yes, who was actually nominated for one BAFTA award. She didn't win, but she was nominated for a BAFTA award. She died in 1994, just at the age of 66, which I thought was really young.
Yeah, so she was very young in this film, and then
Hmm.
she, well, actually no, she wouldn't have been that young. Yeah, no.
No,
Oh, she would have been very young. So
yeah.
then she was known for Cleopatra in 1963, which was
Mhm.
the Elizabeth Taylor version, and Never Take Candy from a Stranger in 1960. So
Yeah,
obviously
never take strangers.
she kind of liked horror. And
Oh, I mean, she didn't do too badly at it.
no, not at all. I thought she was one of the better actors in
Mhm.
the film. Then Roderick was played by Kay Tendetter, and he is was from London, Whitechapel, that is, born in 1909, and he was known for The Fall of the House of Usher. This is the only film he made.
Yeah, it was kind of like he was just, oh, let's just choose him, but then nah, he's not going to go very far, apparently.
Exactly. And so then we have the character of Jonathan, who was the unnamed narrator, the friend
Hmm.
Roderick that came to visit. His name was Irving Steen in real life, and he was from Nottinghamshire, England, born in 1904, and he was known for the fall of the House of Usher, but he did not pass on until 1970, and this was the only movie he made.
Hmm. It seems like they all fell with the House of Usher.
Exactly. That's a House of Barnett with the director.
Yes.
You also have in Poe's story there is a doctor. There is a doctor in this. There's some other characters that we're not going to talk about yet. There were some servants, but we'll get to those people later. Two specific character, non-character. Eugenie, you know which one I'm talking about.
No, the
Let's not talk about it yet. Let's save that.
yeah,
But so it
the
really
anomaly. We'll
yeah,
call it the anomaly.
yes, okay, I like that. I like that. And so just yeah. And so then we
Yeah.
have the chorus as Jeannie was talking about. And Jeannie, why don't
Hmm.
you talk to that since you brought it up?
Well, it's like I was telling Carmen when we first started talking about this, I was very excited when the movie started
Me too.
because it had, even though it had this modern feel, it was one of these to where you were being led into it.
Hmm.
And they were actually discussing Poe and his works. And this one gentleman who we will call him the lead of the chorus,
Yes.
that
And
was
this
the
was
lead storyteller.
yes, and it was called the Gresham Club. So like a gentleman's
Yes.
club back in
Okay, yeah, it was a gentleman's club because they were all men.
yes.
Um, and he literally goes over to the bookcase and gets the book of Poe's works. And I can't remember exactly what the title of the book was, but it just said the mystery. I think it was the mystery and
I think it
something. They
was
had
Tales
like,
of Mystery and Imagination because I have
yes, I think that's what
a
it is.
modern version of that. Yes.
Yes. So he gets it off the bookcase. He goes, he sits down, and he's sitting there with his group, and he starts reading the story, and he
Yeah.
tells them about the fall of the House of Usher. And so I get so excited because I'm like, finally, someone is going to actually do a movie that's truly based on the story. So
Yeah.
he starts telling the story and he leads into it just like in the story, and then all of a sudden it starts veering off into the wide blue yonder.
Mm-hmm.
It's still in the same setting of the House of Usher and all this, and you still have little bits and pieces of the story, but then it's like the melodrama takes over. And
Yes.
then you have these anomalies that pop up, and you're going,
Well,
huh?
and we'll get to that. I want to add one thing to
Yeah.
the gentleman's club that you mentioned. So
Yeah.
before he went over and grabbed the book, he made this quote, and I didn't write it down verbatim, but it's pretty close. And he said, for talking about Poe's tales when discussing the actual author Poe, it's a weakness. You really don't know what the ending will be or what it's like. He
Yes.
leaves them he leaves you with going to your own imagination. And I don't know how many
Yes.
times we've said that
Hmm.
in our podcast, and
Yes.
that yes, Poe
At
leaves
Poe and Plug, especially, we talk about
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, so I really liked that even back in 1950, they were saying it then, which we know people have said this from when Poe wrote in the 1800s.
Yeah, and and that's one of the things that made him iconic is that the beginning of his stories wasn't truly the beginning, and
Hmm.
the ending of his stories was never truly the ending.
Yes.
He always left it open-ended from
Yep.
beginning to end, so the reader could put their own imagination and
Hmm.
write their own story
Yeah,
with the story, which
exactly.
was iconic Poe.
Yes.
And
Now,
I think I love that, like you said, I love that he actually said that at the beginning of the movie
yeah, and
when
then
he was describing Poe.
yes, and they were talking about he brought up the fall of the House of Usher and said it's one of the scariest stories. But then another gentleman added in, "Oh, have you read The Pit and the Pendulum?" Which
Hmm.
was some foreshadowing because that element kind of came up later, which we'll address in a little bit.
Yeah, and we've discussed in other reviews of how they like to mesh a lot
Yes.
of different Poe isms
Yes.
of Poe stories in the movies to where it becomes a scavenger hunt of like, okay, how many one? If we could, if you're an adult, you could turn it into a drinking game for some of these movies.
That is so
Anything that
true.
relates to anything that's not part of the story that's Poe, then you could take a
Exactly.
drink.
Yeah. And
Just saying.
some people might find some really loose connections.
Exactly. Very loose
But,
connection.
but yeah, but just like Jeannie said, the man starts to read the story and it
Hmm.
goes, it kind of, does the whole blah, 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 blah through the screen,
Yes.
goes into the decrepit woods and shows the tarn. And then it shows Jonathan from afar on his horse riding along the road up to the House of Usher. And you see it,
Yeah.
and they never show a close up. I think it's because the house was a lot newer than and in better shape than where they could have filmed it maybe. And so, or it could have been just a picture that they had, is what I kind of guessed.
Well, and also later on in the movie, when, during one particular part, you can tell that it's an actual model of like a dollhouse version
Yes,
that
yes.
they're using. So it's not, I don't even think it may be true location.
I don't
Or
think,
like you said, it was a more modern
yeah,
house that they were using on location because that's all they could afford.
exactly. But immediately when Jonathan gets there, the doctor, pretty much greets him, not at the door, but soon after, and
Mhm.
tells him that, you need to leave. There's some bad stuff going on. And
Mhm.
he mentions Madeline and all this kind of stuff. But does Jonathan do take his advice? No, he stays.
No, and I think one of the things that is mentioned is more of instead of a sickness, it's more of a curse.
Yes, that comes later because the this is the one time that they've shown Madeline not sickly because immediately
Yeah.
they're talking, they pan through a door and you hear piano music and she's sitting playing the piano, sitting upright,
Mhm.
and then there is a servant that brings her a glass of milk. And Jeannie, do we want to talk about that aspect now, or because we can talk about it later when it comes up again?
No, I think we should just talk about how this is where, in my opinion, the story kind of starts veering a little into the away from where I was hoping it would go.
Yeah,
So instead of start telling the story as Poe wrote it,
right.
this is where you start seeing the little nuances that they've added in themselves.
The
For
license,
example, like you
basically.
said,
Yeah.
with Madeline, you're expecting to see someone who's sickly, someone, you know, of that type about how the doctor is telling Jonathan that you don't need to be here. This is a house that's, people should be staying away from,
Mhm.
but then it's not. You find a very, in my opinion, a very sane and a very well Madeline.
Right. And
And then the same thing with Roderick. At some point, Roderick, in my opinion, looked more, well, acted more,
bubbles, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
troubled. I was going to say crazy,
Well,
but more troubled than what you were expecting because you from the story, you're expecting them to be, since they're twins, to
Right.
be suffering at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started going, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And then this is where I think the Greek part came in.
Okay.
Like I was talking about how they did most of the acting, but they had masks on, so there was no verbal unless it came from the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the story stopped being told,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Even though they were speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, they were speaking, but it was just so minimal
Yeah.
and melodramatic that
Yes.
instead
Yes.
of adding to the story, it started detracting from it.
Almost puppet like in a way.
Yes,
Yeah.
it that
Yeah.
that it,
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
it started affecting me in the movie.
Yeah. Well,
That's
and
what I'll say
Roderick alludes to that, the doctor is baffled because he's not sure what Madeline's malady is, that
there.
apathy, she comes into these cataleptic states, which throughout the movie, except for one time, she has a cataleptic state. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, okay, there should have been more tie-ins here, just like
Mm-hmm.
this post story. And then the one thing I did really like when they did show Madeline for the first time and then kind of kept going with this, and they even used Roderick in it as well. They used a lot of artistic camera shots with mirrors. And I thought, the artistic part of me says, I hope the director did this to show like that twin kind of connection with this and the soul within the mirror, and
Mm-hmm.
what's not real. But part of me, then the realistic side of me says maybe he just did it because it looked cool.
Yeah, that's
But I
kind of like
liked
what
it.
it
I
did with
really liked
me.
it. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, some things that they were choosing to add in there, I was like, okay, I can see where they were going with it.
Yeah.
But the mirrors of the mirrored soul, or what's inside, what she was seeing, that maybe what was outside was not uh was perfect, was not the diseased part, but the mirror was showing the inside of what was truly going on with her, kind of
Right.
thing.
Exactly.
I That's not where I thought it was going, because it didn't really come through, but I could see where he was trying to lead it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, no, and that's what I say. I was kind of skeptical throughout the movie once
Yes.
it got to about this part. And then this is where it really turned away from Poe's story. So the doctor is talking to Roderick, and let's see, Jonathan wasn't anywhere to be found.
Mm-mm.
It was like Roderick and Jonathan talked for a minute, like, hey, glad you're here, blah, blah, blah. And then the doctor pulls Roderick away and says, I want to tell you the real story about why things are the way they are. And basically, he tells Roderick that it's based on a curse because
Yeah.
Roderick's mother was having an affair with her lover, and Roderick's father had or killed this man.
Mm-hmm. And that's just when I went, huh?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, this is what really bothered me right there, is not so much the veering off,
Mm-hmm.
was that why did the doctor just now
Tell
start
this.
telling Roderick this whole rigmarole, wild out kind of story about an affair, and how this was a curse, and how the father ended up being, turned into a murderer, and I'm going,
Yeah. Why
this,
now? Why
if
now?
you should be telling anybody, wouldn't you think they should be telling Jonathan?
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
like you said, just Jonathan just blinked out and was totally lost in the conversation.
Yeah. He
And I
wasn't even
thought,
there. He wasn't even there.
I'm like, is he trying to make this like it's an hallucination? Is the doctor even real?
Right.
Or,
But then you see Madeline is overhearing this whole story. So she
Hmm.
hears it and everything. So then not just that this is a curse and that the
Hmm.
kids are not supposed to live, I think till how old was did they have an age or a certain amount of years? I can't
I
remember.
can't remember either. I think it was just a certain amount of years.
I actually did not write that part down. But
Yeah.
then the doctor says, but there's more. Wait for it.
Yeah.
And the picture behind me ties into this. I'm not going to tell you
Hmm.
the whole thing yet, but basically, the two men over my right shoulder, which, if you're looking at me, I guess it's my right shoulder, but to your left side of the screen.
Yes.
Um, that is the doctor and Roderick going to a temple where there is a torture chamber down in the basement or the dungeon, whatever you want to call it. So, of course, foreshadowing solved. Da da da, the pit and the
The pit
pendulum
and the
hiding.
pendulums. Do, 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 do. It's like, oh, yes, let's just stick it right here out of nowhere. Because why? Why do we need a torture chamber? Who
Mm-hmm.
was being tortured? Why were they being tortured? And why all of a sudden are they walking across the grounds
At
to
night.
this whole different place? Yes, and in all honesty, the picture behind you, that tower thing that looks like a water tower, if
Right.
you look at it, you know what I think of? The War
What?
of the Worlds, because it looks just like one of those.
I think I thought that too. And then I also was thinking like one of the monuments, like uh
Yeah, like a cemetery monument.
or a
It would,
monument like one of the memorials in Washington, D.C.
yeah, that thing too. But I mean, you can tell it's the top of a building. But
Exactly.
if, when you just look at it, it's like, why do they have a water tower? Or why are we looking at War of the Worlds? Are they getting invaded by aliens too? Is this what?
And then the
Then with this
tree,
story,
yeah,
we
the tree
we
on the right side of the screen looks like it's reaching out to this figure behind me, but we're not going to tell you who this figure is yet. And
no,
well, actually, no, we can because
yeah,
actually, it's at first when I got this picture, I was thinking of this is another character that we haven't mentioned, but it's actually who of all people would be following them? Jeannie?
it would be Madeline, of
Yes.
course.
So this is Madeline following along to find out what this is all about.
And this right, and I hate to say it, but this picture right here tells you a lot about the movie itself. Because when you have someone that's supposed to be following someone, they should not be facing where, yes, if they just barely looked over their shoulder or
It's
just glanced, she's right there. She's not really being very stealthy. I mean, and
oh
this is nighttime. And she
yes.
doesn't even have a lantern. She doesn't
Nope.
have anything. And the
Black
doctor's the
cloak.
only one that's carrying anything. And it's like, okay.
I know.
Well,
And so, they get down into this torture chamber and the doctor basically says that this is the place where their mother and the lover would meet. I think
hmm.
that's the reason why the father put the torture chamber down there. And so basically,
Or that could have been their own little playground. You never know.
yeah, you never know. And the death occurred. The father placed the man on a rack and made the lover watch the father beat the mother. And the man yelled out a curse and said, oh, I did write it down, said that the twins would not live until they were 30.
Hmm.
The mother lost her speech at this time. And guess who was down in the dungeon?
Hmm. When? During the whole thing?
Yeah, well, like when they first go down there, guess who's waiting for them in the dungeon?
Wouldn't that be the.
The mother.
Yeah, exactly.
And she looked, my first thought when I saw her, again, I don't know that she has any other acting credits. I couldn't figure out if she was being referred to as the hag, is what I kind of guessed on the credits. But
Hmm.
she couldn't speak. She was in all black. very long black hair. She had on a hood, kind of just like Madeline has. And she reminded me of the live version of the original Disney Snow White animated version, The Wicked Witch, when she's giving the apples to Snow White. Like
Oh,
Warren
you mean the
Rose and
evil
everything.
queen?
Yeah, the Evil Queen. Yes. Sorry.
Hmm.
Yes.
Well, that too, but the one thing that got me when I first saw her, I was like, good Lord, where'd the plague come in? Because
Yeah.
it looked like she was wearing one of those plague masks
It
the
did look
doctors
like
used to
that.
wear.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Her nose was
okay, are
very
they trying to
pronounced.
make
Yeah.
it? Well, I can understand kind of where they were going, especially with the whole description of the torture and, how she wasn't able to speak and how maybe she was wearing a mask to hide the disfigurement or
Right.
whatever. But at the same time, I'm like you. Is she like the evil queen and the plague doctor mixed? Because it was just weird. This is
It
what I was
was.
telling you about the anomaly. This was the
Oh,
first
yeah.
anomaly where you go,
Oh, yeah. And the doctor didn't act like he knew she was down there. And then it got even weirder because all of a sudden, what looks like a head is on the wall, and you don't get, is it the father's head? Is it the lover's head? And this is the second anomaly Jeannie's talking about. I'll let you take this one
well, and this is what I was telling Carmen is when I first saw it, I went, why did they have an octopus hanging there?
because of his
'Cause
hair
that's what
and yeah,
yeah, that's what
yeah,
it looked like because, it was just a chopped off head that the hair was all splayed out and everything. And it, I was telling Carmen, I'm like, okay, are we talking now about a kraken?
yeah,
Because it's kind of like what it looked. Because I
yeah,
thought, where did we go to a seaside village of the monster?
exactly.
But it kind of went with the whole thing with the mother now. It was just so
It was weird.
bizarre.
Yeah, and then of course, my first thought was one of the later story arcs in Dark Shadows had this head that
Hmm.
was, doing ill will and things like that. And so that's what that made me think of. I know the people from Dark Shadows, I'm sure, did not get the idea from this. But yeah, the
No.
head was like hanging on the wall, and then the doctor says, if we burn the head, the curse will go away. So they make a plan
Mhm.
to get the gardener, bring him back, and do all this. And that just doesn't work. And then,
Why would you? That's another thing that just was totally out there. Why would you need to get the gardener to burn the dude's head?
exactly.
It
Well,
all, that's the thing. It was like you're trying to build in part of the story, but you're still just making it worse. Now, part of it is like the mother shows up, but nobody like notices her there. So then I know where they were trying to go is that she's not really alive.
right, right.
She's just a ghost because every time that she shows up from then on, that she's following the twins around,
Yeah,
but you can't really see her, is what he was aiming for.
yeah. But it didn't really,
Um,
the
yeah,
execution
it just
did
didn't
not,
come.
yeah,
Yeah, it just didn't. And then I think, she was tied to the torture chamber because of the head,
right,
you know.
exactly. Yes. And because the doctor never says that she was beaten to death, it was just that she was beaten. So you have to wonder, okay, like you said, is she really alive? Is she not? But then she does have a knife and kills the gardener. And
Mm,
so then, they lie to Madeline because she's asking about him. And then Madeline goes on her own, and then the mother tries to attack her. She gets away. It's just all crazy. But when she leaves, this is another, plot hole.
mm,
Knocks over that torch that was on the wall, and a fire starts. And so,
mm.
if the doctor was correct that if you burn the head, the curse is ended, why, when the fire started, did they not go back to show it may be burning the head or burning the whole
Mm.
temple? They didn't do that. And I was like, okay, did mom
Yeah,
have a bucket of water?
and and at the same time, as if the head burned, and so did the torture chamber per
Right,
se, why didn't the mother kind of disappear in
right.
itself?
Yeah,
Why was she still sticking around? And why was she trying to kill her own children?
exactly. Maybe because of the curse, but we can only speculate because mom couldn't talk.
Well, and the same thing is like, and this is another thing. How did the doctor know about the curse?
Exactly.
Because I mean, it's like if the only people that were in the torture chamber was the Roderick and Madeline's father and mother and the lover, then how the hell did the doctor know that there was a curse and then
Yeah,
that the head on the wall, the
right.
the creepy octopus looking one, um, that the speculation is if we burn the head, the curse will go away, and
Let's
it's like
call him Mandusa, like instead of
Mandusa, yeah, I like that. Because
maybe.
he definitely did look like and the whole Greek thing comes
Yeah,
back. That's another thing. It did look like a
yes,
Medusa.
it did. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was the thing.
And
But
then loosely like a pirate too.
yeah, it was weird. And this is where, once more, like I was telling Carmen, this is where it kind of goes off the rails for me,
It
to
really does.
where we've got so many plot holes. We have stories that are happening. Jonathan, who knows what's happening with him where
Yeah,
he's gone because we don't know. He just shows up randomly, and then a few scenes later, and we're going. And then I never could figure out if this is a curse that was brought on by the torture and killing of the mother and the lover, or the mother's lover, or whatever you want to say it.
right.
Um, Then why is not Jonathan, why is Roderick killing his own sister?
That's a really good question. Yeah, because like when Jonathan comes back on, he's writing in his journal and
Hmm.
he's like they kind of pan to Roderick painting and Jonathan's talking about how talented Roderick is with all of his art and things.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, Roderick comes in while Jonathan's writing and says, Madeline is dead. And
Hmm.
wants to, place her in the vault and he needs his help to take her down there. And so Roderick already has her in a coffin. They start heading down. The doctor's always, hanging out with them
Hmm.
and they place her in one of the vaults. And he
Yeah, the doctor is
opens
creepy in himself, but
he really is. He really belongs in the torture chamber. But the well, and I just thought of something too. But then even Roderick even opens up the coffin to show Jonathan that she appears dead. He says she's dead, and then he closes
hmm
it back up. Now, one of the things you just brought up, Jeannie, about, how does the doctor know about the curse? Was the head, because we never find out definitively, with
hmm
the head the father or the lover? Was the doctor the lover?
exactly.
'Cause he would
That
be
was the
about the
other
same
thing.
age.
Yeah, that was the other thing that got me confused because when I saw the head on the wall, I immediately thought it was the father.
Okay.
See, I didn't even think about it being the lover, and then all of
I
a
thought
sudden I'm
both.
like, well,
Yeah. I thought it could be
yeah.
both, either
Then
one.
I thought about it. Okay, maybe it's the lover.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, how does the doctor know all this? Especially, how does the doctor know about the curse?
Right.
You know,
Because
and
he would have put the
so,
curse. If he was the lover, he would have
mhm,
put the curse.
yeah, and that's the thing. It was just,
It doesn't add up. It doesn't add.
yeah, it's just too convoluted in my opinion. And
Yeah.
another thing is they made out that Roderick was the one who was truly insane
Mm-hmm.
and was the one because he killed Madeline, and then all of a sudden Madeline comes back from the grave.
Right. And in true Poe form, this is one part that they go back to the story. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bad storm. There had been several days that had
Mm-hmm.
passed, and Roderick's kind of going a little out of his head, and that's
Hmm.
not helping anything. So Jonathan opens up and says, I'll read to you. And he reads the story of Ethelred, which in the Haunted Palace is, he reads that to Roderick, just like in Poe's story, to try to
Yes.
calm him down. And so I really liked that they went back to that and that he actually read what was in Poe's story to him.
Hmm. It, and that's what it just, in my opinion, it was way too late by that time
Oh, yeah. Well, then,
for recovery.
right.
And
And
then when all of a sudden Madeline shows up, and then
yeah,
Roderick just pulls out a gun from nowhere.
I know. And before that, as Jonathan's reading, I did like the suspense side by side of as he read, the
Hmm.
coffin starts opening up and she's coming out, and then moaning is heard. And that's about when Roderick pulls out the gun, and we're like, okay, where did this come from? Why now?
Yeah.
Why now?
Yeah, I mean, they tried to build the suspense and tried to recover, in my opinion, the horror aspect of the House of Usher at this time. But it fell flat, in my opinion. It just went,
Yeah.
okay. You're confused and just underwhelmed with the whole weird curse vision thing, that by the time you circle back around, that yeah, I did enjoy the whole Jonathan reading Roderick to try to calm him down and all that. And then the thunderstorm and the whole rising from the tomb, not tomb, but the coffin, pine box. Let's just call it a pine box.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Well, it
but
almost looked like it had a zipper on top, though.
you did. And my thing is that I was like, how does she have that much energy
Yeah.
when she's pushing and waving her arms around? But
Yeah.
then when you see her trying to get out of the coffin, it's like suddenly she's turned into a turtle.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
she came out of the coffin with like, ah,
Oh, I
and
know.
all of a sudden it's like, I can barely move. I can't
And
move.
the
So
the
what the
one
heck?
thing after this is because of all the moaning and the noise and everything else, it really does show Roderick's, intense hypersensitivity to noise because the clock keeps getting louder. He's like putting his head in his hands like this, and being stressed and everything else. And he screams, "She's alive and I hear her," and
Man, it doesn't help when he starts firing that dad blasted gun. If he's
oh, I
got
know.
sensitivity to sounds, he's screaming and he's shooting the gun, the clock's getting louder, and
Yeah.
I'm getting annoyed going, dude, if she's dead, what good's a bullet gonna do?
Right. Well,
That's
we
the
don't
thing.
know.
It's
Yeah, we don't know if she really dead or not. Yeah.
well, I'm sorry, that one point when he shot her point blank
Yeah.
and she still kept coming, I'm thinking, okay, she has to be dead.
Yeah.
But at the same time, who looks that good if they've been dead that long?
Oh yeah, exactly. She looked the same as she did when she got put in the box.
Yes, her hair was just the same,
Yeah.
coof, really cute. Her same outfit
Was
was
no
not, there was
blood, no
nothing, no
scratching,
dirt,
or
none, nothing.
anything. Yeah.
And
And
I'm thinking,
yeah, and
okay.
then it was like she was chasing him, but walking. They were both walking, and he was walking backwards, and they kept climbing and climbing up until they got on the roof. And as she kept coming, Jeannie and I kind of debated how many shots did he fire. I wrote it down every time I thought that he shot, and I counted
Mhm.
five. Jeannie thinks she counted six, and it's like, so at least with a gun, the type of gun he had, that hopefully was about accurate, maybe.
Well, for the time period, I didn't
I'm still
research it as
wondering.
much, but I was telling Carmen that, it kind of looked like it was a Navy Colt pistol,
Mhm.
um,
It had a
that
really
could hold
long.
about five, balls. Because remember, the bullets in those days, in the 1800s and stuff, they were big. They weren't like the small bullets of the repeating rifles that didn't come around until after about the last half of the Civil War.
Gotcha.
So it just, but at the same time, I'm going, really? Why? If the, what was the point of him shooting her? Because
Exactly.
if she's dead, shooting her is not going to matter.
Not at
And
all.
if she's not dead, then why the hell is she chasing him? And
Exactly.
she's not chasing him because all I got flashbacks for Mike Myers and Jamie Lee Curtis. Let's just switch them around because Roderick was Jamie Lee
Mike.
Curtis
Yeah. And
and
it sounds
Madeline was
weird
Mike.
when you say Mike Myers because it sounds like the comedian, not Michael Myers.
Yeah. Well, it's like either one is my opinion, but
Sorry,
I'd
that's
be
funny.
running from either one of them.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but that was just that slow build up to where you're
Yes.
thinking that, come on, Roderick, why are you running onto the? This is what I couldn't understand. Why was he going up?
I know. I know. I
You
thought the same thing. I'm
like
like, dude, go down. Go down the stairs. Go outside the house.
it was about it was like the opposite of ever horror, where most of the time they go in the basement.
Yep.
They were going
Out
on
to
the
the
roof.
woods. Yeah. Yeah.
And then this is what really got me too, is they're actually on top of the roof, but
Yes.
the fire starts inside the house.
Yes. Exactly.
I'm like, okay.
And then
That just
the
made no
mother is
sense.
also following them at this
Okay.
point, and then she backs him up into a corner, Madeline does, and it's just it is kind of, lackluster, anticlimactic. You know what's going to happen. He falls off the roof and dies.
Yeah. Yeah. He falls off the roof and dies. There's a fire starts from who knows where. I don't even know what happened to Jonathan.
It showed him outside watching the house burn, and the
That's how I don't understand. How did he get outside so quickly
I know,
while they're running around on the roof? And
right.
I use running as,
Yeah,
not.
exactly. So you know that Roderick fell, and he's going to get consumed by the fire eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And, he died probably instantly when he hit the ground. And the mother and anybody else that was in there would have perished as well from the fire. But
I don't
this,
know. If Madeline can't get killed by a bullet, who knows? The
oh,
fire probably wouldn't touch her either.
true. But if let's just say she was a ghost. I mean,
Yeah.
but her body came out of the coffin. So that was questionable.
Uh-huh.
That was questionable. But this is one of the things that really bothered me because in every version I have ever seen of The Fall of the House of Usher by Poe, the last line is always read because it is the most poignant line in the entire story. And
Yep.
because of this, I am going to read it aloud to
Yep. They
Sir
need to be
Poe.
bought,
Yes,
the chorus or the gentleman's club, they didn't
should have
even
read.
finish it, which
Yeah,
I thought
they should have
they
read.
should have.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should have finished it. That's how the movie should have ended.
Yeah, they just start asking questions about different things about,
Hmm.
who really killed who and that kind of thing, almost like a murder mystery. And I was just like, are you kidding me? They're not reading the last line. So,
Yeah.
to Poe, here is the last line.
Dun, dun, dun.
While I gazed, this fissure rapidly widened. There came a fierce breath of the whirlwind. The entire orb of the satellite burst at once upon my sight. My brain reeled as I saw the mighty walls rushing asunder. There was a long, tumultuous shouting sound like the voice of 1,000 waters, and the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the House of Usher. The end.
Yes, and that's how it should have ended.
It should have. The gentleman could
Mhm.
have read that, and I think that would have been the perfect way to end this movie.
Well, and that's the thing. If he's reading the story to them the whole time,
Hmm.
then that should have been the last line to end it, and then they could have started discussing about how it happened. But I think because they veered too much and talked about this curse and everything,
Yeah.
that kind of, that's how they went away from Poe, and I was very disappointed.
Yeah. Me too.
I started out feeling good, then I'm like, oh, you didn't.
They
You
gave,
didn't.
gave us a little hope here and there, throwing in some things, but yeah,
Mm-hmm. It
it
was
was.
pitiful.
This is not the worst Poe
No.
adaptation I've ever seen. And so I think you'll be surprised at my scores, but it
Probably won't be with mine, but okay.
oh no, you're not. It's not going to be as bad as last month.
Oh no, I don't think anything to get that bad.
But then,
I, I, I don't want to jinx myself for future reviews, so
that's
I'll
true.
take that back. Okay,
Oh, that's true. All right. Do you want to go first or do you want me to?
you can go first.
Okay.
I think I went first last time.
Yeah, I don't remember, but it's
I
all
don't either.
okay. All right. So I gave it 4 Raven calls. Okay.
Okay.
Because the setting was very gothic. The lighting
Mm-hmm.
was great, causing lots of creepy shadows. The angles of the camera, especially with the mirrors, even though I think the effect that they were going for is not what I was hoping, it still, I think it added a lot to that gothic nature. Okay. Um, I thought the acting was not bad. But I'm trying to see, looking at my notes. The parts that were actually like told from Poe's story were really good. Again, it was too disjointed, and I'll talk about that with my hisses. And I thought the music was very appropriate to build suspense. So
Okay.
those were the things I really liked. Um, so Black Cat hisses, I also gave 4. So that's why I remember I told you kind of canceled myself out.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
reason why I did this is that the narrator, Jonathan, is telling the story in Poe's work. And when he is disappearing from a huge chunk of the story, how can he tell the story? And I know it's a
Mm-hmm.
movie, but that bothered me. That
Yeah.
part bothered me. Um, and then what real part did the mother and the head play? If neither one of those were in here, even if they added a torture chamber for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
they really, it didn't, the only thing that I can see is that if you were a young teenager in 1950 going to see this movie, the mother would have scared you to death, and so would the head.
Yeah.
And so I think they were going for the horror factor, and I just didn't like that either. I just think it took away from Poe's story. And then they never went to check on the head burning, like did it
Mm-hmm.
burn up, did it not? Because if it did, then Madeline and Roderick would have been fine because the curse would have ended. And
Yeah. And where did the
so,
doctor go?
yeah, exactly.
You
And
know, it's
then
like, oh, okay.
so that's kind of like I said, I kind of canceled myself out in my scores. And yeah, it's like some of the parts I really liked and some of them I really didn't like. And so it was very hard for me to score this one, but I thought about it quite a bit after I wrote my notes down.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't even prepare notes, but for this one I had to because it was so disjointed.
Yeah. It
So,
just, well, and that leads me um into mine. I have to start with Raven Cause.
okay.
It got a 3.
Okay.
And it probably would have gone higher because, like I said, I was excited with the beginning that it had the aspects of it was truly going to be Poe and be a Poe story.
Hmm.
I did enjoy the acting from all characters. Some even their the melodrama was a little much, but they still kept character, in my opinion.
Mhm.
They pulled it off. I did enjoy a lot of the nod or the nudge toward the horror
Yeah.
with the cinematography, with the music, with just the setting itself. So it was the story veering that got me.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't go higher than a three.
Okay, that makes sense.
If they could have kept it closer to the Poe story, the way they were going with it, I think it would have truly probably notched higher around the five or the six mark.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because they brought in all this nonsense and these anomalies, three. So that's why it leads me into the Black Cat Hisses
Mhm.
are four,
Okay.
because it was because of the veering from the true story and the anomalies and just the plot holes of bringing in another story inside the story that really had nothing to do with the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it made the audience, me, doubt that this was even movie worthy
Hmm.
at that point,
Okay.
because the moment they brought in this whole curse chamber pit, I knew they were nodding toward the pit and the pendulum and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time it was unnecessary.
Yeah.
I guess that's the biggest thing. All the things that they tried to introduce to heighten the story was actually major detractions, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's why it got four black cat hisses and only three raven caws. Now, if they could have flipped everything around, I think it would have totally shifted it for
Oh,
me.
yeah. I agree.
But I did, like I said, I did enjoy the nod to the Greek tragedies
Hmm.
because, truly, the fall of the House of Usher, in my opinion, is a true tragedy.
Oh, it is. And it is like a Greek tragedy, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I liked how they tried to manage with that. I liked how they wanted to bring in the aspects of the chorus, that they actually had an outside audience narrator, a dramatic narrator.
Mhm.
And then Jonathan himself was kind of the narrator, but he just disappeared and reappeared. It's like that's one of the things. There was too many appearances and disappearances of characters to make the story flow.
Yeah, the inconsistencies were there
There
because
you go.
Jonathan should have been one of the most pivotal characters other than
Hmm.
Roderick and Madeline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
The doctor
and
really
there you,
got almost more billing than they did.
yeah, I'm all about, I like melodrama. There is some good stuff in melodrama. The archetypes are
Hmm.
great when you put them correctly in a melodrama,
Absolutely.
but you just you can't mix things and make it work.
Mix your
And they just
archetypes.
totally do what?
Mix your archetypes or mix your melodramas.
Exactly. You can't do that because it just, it's not like a good martini.
Yeah.
Dry, shaken or stirred,
Hmm.
where you can't put them both together
Yeah.
because it doesn't work. You have to either have one or the other. You
Yeah.
can't put them together.
Yeah. I agree.
So, and that's kind of like what I felt, is that I was shaken and stirred too much this
That's a
movie.
great metaphor.
Yeah. So it fell flat on all senses front. So,
Yes. All right.
yeah.
Well,
So there you have it. The Fall of the House of Usher, 1950 version.
yes. And
It has its moments, but it is worth a watch
yeah,
at
I
least
agree.
once.
Yeah,
I say that.
I'm glad I watched it. I am.
Mhm.
So what are we watching for next month?
Oh, you have to go back to the list here.
You knew
And
I'd
on that list, we have, well, No. The Phantom of the Rue Morgue, 1954 version.
Okay.
It says when several women are found mutilated and murdered, the Paris police are baffled as to who the killer may be. All the evidence points to Dupin.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Okay.
but soon it becomes apparent that it is someone or something stronger and deadlier than a human. So it's directed by Roy Del Ruth. Trying to say that together. Roy Del Ruth. Stars Carl Malden, Claude Dauphin, Dauphin, yeah, that's right, and Patricia Medina.
Okay. We know Carl Malden.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's because the next ones that are on the list are barely like 8 minutes and 20 minutes. So yeah.
We'll go to,
Um,
yeah, a long
yeah, so
after that.
actually though, this short 20-minute one kind of got a high review, had 86 watches and had a high review,
Mhm.
but it only had like one person, and well, it was the Telltale Heart, so
That makes sense. Yeah.
yes. So yeah, the Phantom of the Rue Morgue is next, a 1954 version.
Okay. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We can go back and this one they switched it up by instead of Dupin being the solving of the murder, he apparently is one of the accused.
Okay. All right.
So next time
That'll
we're
be good.
going to go to Dupin.
Yes. And please check out our Facebook. We're on X. We're on Instagram. And we have
Mhm.
our YouTube channel, Poe Unplugged. Check those out.
3978.
Yes, Poe Unplugged 3978. And subscribe to our channel because we put, we're on Spotify and all the major podcast platforms.
Hmm.
But on YouTube, you get a video and you get an audio. And so we also have all of our episodes, but we have our shorts that we do. And Jeannie has Time Talks. I have On the Road with Carmen. We have lots of different things. So please subscribe to our channel. That would be awesome.
Yep. Check us out on all social media and
Our website
just continue following us, and we will be here bringing you more Poe for the Poe people out there.
forevermore. And let
Exactly.
us know if you watch this movie, comment,
Mhm.
let us know what you think, if you agreed with our Raven calls or Black Cat hisses. I guess on that note, Jeannie,
Note, we are
are
Poe.
out.